once the vicious cycles have been interrupted and people aren't really controlled anymore by these automated urges and things, there's a much more interesting path that opens up, which is a new ease at building virtuous cycles. And then you're going to find that even in work that had once been really challenging in a negative sense, you come to love new forms of challenge. And you discover, oh, there's some, this is like a challenge to creativity. And this is a challenge to my ability to be understanding with others. And this, you start to actually see all the ideals more than you see the difficulties.
Hey, this is Sharif here with another episode of Golden Hour, joined by Dr. Kevin Majors. Kevin, good to be back here with you again.
Hey, Sharif, it's great to be back.
Yeah, Kevin. Well, I wanted to follow up on last week's conversation. It was super interesting. And we talked about the predictions that your brain makes and how to break through them, how to get past them to perform at your best. And I thought we could more explicitly in this episode follow up on that theme, but tie it into our core model of reframing, mindfulness, and challenge, and see exactly what the overlap is here.
Yeah, great. It's a very deep topic, and it has to do with one, what's the relationship of discomfort or pain to what we normally tell people about? What are you reframing? What are you mindful of? What does the challenge look like? And so often, pain is essential to that. In some way, it's about how you relate to discomfort that, in fact, is needed to grow. So that we talk about the soreness that comes when you're working out. That soreness could be avoided. You could see it as that discomfort is bad, or you could see it as exactly the incipient good. That's how you are getting stronger, is through this soreness. So our model always relates in some way to the presence of discomfort or anxiety. Anxiety simply being the urge to avoid challenges. And discomfort is what you get when you approach them. So looking into this, it's really fascinating though. I think you can derive our entire model just from the discussion of predictions. And it comes down again to think of the discomfort that you have if you are experiencing negative emotion. So I don't know, Sharif, what would be a situation in which you might experience some kind of negative emotion?
I suppose if, probably being overwhelmed, having a lot on my plate and worrying, I'm not going to get it all done on time.
Okay.
I'm gonna let people down, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So whenever you have a lot on your plate, then there's going to be some kind of discomfort that you feel. So take that sense of being overwhelmed. Where in your body do you think you feel it the most?
Probably in my chest.
Yeah. Okay, now just pause that for a moment and think. When you're talking about prediction and pain or discomfort, we're really talking about three kinds of pain as possibilities. The first kind of pain is the pain you get from tissue damage, like you get burned or cut or something like that. That's the primary case of pain. That's the primary natural form of pain. And it's in some senses pre-psychological. So it's just there in the body.
That's not what we're dealing with here.
Not at all. And then the second kind of pain is nerve pain. So you have tissue pain and then you have nerve pain. Nerve pain is in certain characteristics. It comes in certain types of neurological disorders or in diabetes, or it means that the nerves themselves have gotten worn down by some process, and now they're giving pain signals when they're just because they're irritated. Well, that's not what's going on here either. So the kind of pain then or discomfort that you have when you feel, say, overwhelmed by all that you have to do, that is the third category. That's predictive pain, right? Or what they call nosoplastic pain. Okay, so how do we help people who have predictive pain? Well, the way it's been done, and in the way it's described in this book, The Experience Machine by Andy Clark, which I don't wholeheartedly recommend because he's such a reductionist in the end, but and he's into psychedelics, which I'm not as interested in. But he does have a great discussion of pain and predictions. And so the first thing he says you have to help people to do is to relabel the pain. and everything about it. Because people like think, oh, this is intolerable. It's too much. I can't do this. And all of that internal labeling ends up amplifying the signal, what really is a prediction error. So discomfort like this is actually a prediction error. And we have internal mechanisms for correcting prediction errors. But when we're left with kind of this long-standing discomfort, something is interfering with prediction error correction. So that's what we're getting into here. It's like, what's interfering? Okay, one, labeling then. So you improve the way you label it. So now you can see it as some kind of practice or training. Okay. The second thing they do is you have to attend to the reality of the pain itself. There is, again, some kind of prediction error occurring. People who have chronic pain syndromes, they feel intense pain, but it's not coming from tissue damage, and it's not coming from nerve damage. So it's coming from the brain itself, and it only feels like it's in the tissue or the place where they're feeling it. So that tension in the chest that people can get when they're feeling anxious or overwhelmed, that very tension isn't really there. So what people have to learn to do is emphasize reality for their attention. So you correct your predictions with attention to reality.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Kevin, can I just jump in with a couple questions here just to clarify? So you mentioned the 3 types of pain. So the third one, predictive pain, how does something like sadness or grief or these types of emotional pain, that's all gets categorized there as predictive pain? I mean, to me, feeling overwhelmed is...
Emotions are predictions.
Okay.
Yeah, they're all predictions.
Okay.
Yeah. And so normally then what happens is they habituate.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to ask ourselves, like, what when they fail to habituate, what's going on? And the idea is that something is interfering with prediction error correction. So the emotion that you experience prepares you to act a certain way. So it's very much a prediction of action. And so fear is a prediction that you're going to flee from the challenge in some way. Anger is that you're going to attack it. So all the emotions in some way are tied to a prediction of action. Sadness is actually predicting that you will withdraw from the pain. And that sense of that produces its own kind of specific feeling.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then, in the case of me being overwhelmed and I have this, feeling that my brain is kind of interpreting as pain, or it's, so what exactly is the prediction that my brain is doing? Is that going to be different for every case and different for every person, or is it predicting that I'm going to fail? Or could you just talk a little bit more about the specifics of I get maybe you have to get more information to tell for any particular case, but kind of more precisely, what is the prediction that's being made here?
So, okay, good. One way of thinking of this then is, what is it predicting you're going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's predicting you're going to run around and that you're going to get less sleep and you're going to do and you're going to quickly go between tasks.
Stay up late probably to accomplish everything.
Exactly. So what you feel when you're feeling this overwhelmed is very much all part of the prediction of what it thinks you're going to be doing. But what would be a completely alternate way this could go? What would it look like to relax and put your best attention with order into one thing at a time? To break through thinking you have to do it all at once, which is kind of what it's preparing you to do. It's as if it's preparing you to do everything at once, which you don't need to do. Instead, you prioritize. Exactly. You just prioritize and you put your full attention into one, and then the next, and then the next. What if you had this other model of how you could act? More like a happy warrior, tackling one thing at a time, just giving each thing your best, with no worries about outcomes at all. Well, so it goes into this idea that even one step behind the prediction is the model you have. So there's templates for what you're like in different situations. And when you have a ton of things to do, that kind of that goes along with this one model in your mind, which then forms predictions. But if you don't correct prediction errors, you don't end up shifting the model at all. So the model becomes fixed, your understanding of what you're like under stress, and the predictions, which are the emotions you feel under stress and the urges you have to act, all of that gets fixed. So if you want to become calm when you feel overwhelmed, then the first thing to do is to relabel what you're going through, which is really reframing. It's to see, okay, this is exactly the practice I need to attain a deeper kind of peace, a peace that's built on order, doing the most important thing and then the next most important thing, one thing at a time. There's always enough time to do the most important thing now. So you don't necessarily have more time than that, but you always have time to do the right thing. So you have this sense of like, oh, what is the most important thing then to do? So what you're trying to do then is adjust yourself to this enhanced model for what you could be like when you have a lot to do. So that means practice, and that means training. And that's what the current experience is giving you. Then the second thing is mindfulness, which is what do you do with the feeling, which is a prediction, of getting all like riled up as if you have to do everything at once. Well, even to that feeling, then you can attend to, okay, what right now, like where are you? What are you feeling in your body? How do you get more grounded in your body as a whole? And you'll see that you're mostly calm. That the sense that you have to be rushing around, you're not actually having to rush around. There's nothing to rush to right now. Your body right now is in a safe place, and you're able to just do one thing. So you kind of settle down. Well, that's what mindfulness does. Mindfulness is the workhorse of prediction error correction. Mindfulness is what allows you to get in touch with reality and correct it. So your experience is a combination of your predictions and reality. What mindfulness does is it shifts the percentage in favor of reality, so that more and more your current experience is just what is, rather than what the model is predicting is. Does that make so? And then the last part, though, is the most important, which is action. Okay, because it's action that will determine overall. So if you act in the prediction of I have to be running around doing everything at once, you'd be quickly flitting between things and rushing and like putting out fires everywhere, versus another opposite way of acting. In this case, I would say sequential unitasking with clear prioritization. With that, then, you're building this, you're again disconfirming the prediction of you rushing around doing everything at once. You've disconfirmed it at the attitude level, at the attention level, and now in the action level. That will produce then the fastest prediction error correction, which is the same as habituation. So for you to shape your experience is to habituate the painful parts. That is prediction error correction. There you go. That's the whole thing. Yeah.
That's great. So one question I have, so with the thing of being overwhelmed, maybe this is I have this experience, but my feeling is that I alternate between two extremes. One is, oh, I have to do every single thing at one time. How am I possibly going to do this? I have to start. I can't, And then the other is, okay, I just can't deal with this. I need to go sleep. So so what's going on there with that?
Well, you have competing
extreme in both directions.
Yeah, you have competing models.
Okay.
So these competing models in the language of IFS would be competing personas or parts. So that there is one part which is much more of like a do-it-all kind of workhorse, like attack everything. And then the other is more of a disengage and soothe oneself. And sleep is one natural way of doing that. They both have the same relationship with anxiety or stress, which is they try to avoid it. One tries to head it off by doing everything perfectly and working in advance, the other by just disconnecting from it. So those are both models that produce predictions, and they're competing. So which one has the upper hand kind of depends on what time of day is it, or like how long. There's a lot of factors that go into it. Okay, now in either one, there is a path of changing how you relate to it. So you're just simply curious about it, that you're compassionate with it, making space to feel what it is, that you can still stay confident in shaping what you do. So there's a way in which the right path is going to be midline between those extremes in some way. And that right path is what you're using to correct both models. And that's what habituation will tend to. So as long as you keep the goal in mind, and what that means is as long as you're decisive about what you will be doing, that decisiveness is going to carry the day and it's going to create the best prediction error correction that there is.
So this is, you're emphasizing the behavior in terms of the
Yes.
behavior is all important in how you correct these vicious cycles.
Yes, because I would say that in some ways, the right behavior is opposite both to the overworking perfectionist part, if that's something, and the more wanting to just sleep or disconnect and rest. So those are like two competing different ways, but the right path of sequential unitasking with real clear priorities, that path is in some way opposite both of them. So as long as you have an image then, which is why ideals are so central to this, that it's the decisiveness of being committed to the right action, everything else follows. All of habituation follows the right approach behavior. So when people come and they say that they're just stuck with some feeling, like they're always overwhelmed, they're always stressed, why aren't those things habituating, they might ask. Like when they come, I feel them, but why don't they habituate? Well, the answer is that they only habituate in the presence of approach behaviors. You have to be deliberately shaping them in a way that gives a clear correction signal to these predictions. If you're giving a mixed signal, particularly if you're avoiding the challenge and you're trying not to have the emotions stimulated even more, the negative ones. Well, in those cases, then any avoidance in your behavior will negate the possibility of habituating. You can't do safety learning in the presence of avoidance. So people really need to think of what would they do, how would they act if they didn't have any of these countervening pulls? If they didn't have any emotion driving their behavior, an urge to sleep or an urge to stay up working. What would they want it to look like? That is the path then. So in the Ignatian sense of challenge, it's agere contra, which is do the opposite. So, and that works for almost every urge that you're trying to habituate. If something isn't habituating, it's because you still have behaviors maintaining it. And then those agere contra, do the opposite of what they entail. Well, that then means first being really decisive about it. So to break the vicious cycle of avoidance. But increasingly then it actually means doing things for love of an ideal, and particularly for love of others by means of that ideal. So it gets deeper and deeper and deeper.
Okay, Kevin, one question I have about this process of habituation is that, what does it look like over the course of one's life? Because if I'm overwhelmed with a certain amount of work or a certain level of difficulty, a certain level of challenge or responsibility, and then I grow and I habituate to that level of difficulty, so the feeling of being overwhelmed kind of goes away. What happens when I encounter greater difficulties, which hopefully I will be doing, as I take on bigger challenges in life? Is that gonna come back and I have to do it over and over and over again? Or what exactly does that path look like?
Yeah, so it is a great question. So I think that initially it's harder to break because you're having to stop vicious cycles. There's some kind of, there might be very minor vicious cycles, not really that vicious, but still avoiding certain challenges or, like in the face of challenge, wanting to, disconnect. And it could be people struggle with any emotion. Initially, there's going to be a kind of momentum to the wrong way of acting, which is just giving in to the urges when they arise. So the initial work of interrupting those urges and acting in a different way, that really, stopping a vicious cycle takes being very decisive. So, but that is the essence then of the action step, to go the opposite of the urge, do the opposite. And so when people have a strong craving, they need to be decisive at saying never again, then I'm done with that. So that you can measure the strength of, in a sense, their commitment just by how decisive they are. But then if you're to ask, like, what does that look like as the rest of their life progresses? They keep making these massive, decisive things like that? No, it actually changes. And it changes because once the vicious cycles have been interrupted and people aren't really controlled anymore by these automated urges and things, there's a much more interesting path that opens up, which is a new ease at building virtuous cycles. And then you're going to find that even in work that had once been really challenging in a negative sense, you come to love new forms of challenge. And you discover, oh, there's some, this is like a challenge to creativity. And this is a challenge to my ability to be understanding with others. And this, you start to actually see all the ideals more than you see the difficulties. So there's this elevating process that takes place. So you move from the struggle being mostly about stopping bad things and discomfort to really increasingly committing yourself on this path of virtuous cycles. And that will continue then as you gather the fruit of these virtuous cycles, which are in fact the virtues. The more you build them up then, I love Flannery O'Connor, the saying, everything that rises must converge. So that's what happens with ideals, that as you keep on upping them, it's not that they get more progressively difficult, it's that they get higher and higher in a different way. So that you now are really being more generous and more caring. Ultimately, everything is about being loving. Every ideal in the end is really a way of loving. And so that becomes the ideal of all ideals. And in the end, you're really then exercising bonds continually. And you see every challenge in terms of bonds. Okay, that way of laying it out, that first you stop vicious cycles, then you have virtuous cycles, and then you continue them in some new way that's more about bonds, that actually is a pre-Christian idea. So Porphyry talks about it. And they talked about the 3 ages of development, that there's a purgative stage, an illuminative stage, and a unitive stage. But that Christianity picked that up immediately when it came on the scene, and has ran with it ever since. That in the purgative stage, people are interrupting vicious cycles. So they put the bad habits behind them, and that requires, on the part of the will, decisiveness. But the illuminative stage is building virtuous cycles. And in the will, that is this greater love for every ideal. That there's actually then the ideal becomes the goal of every action, and different ideals for different ones. But as that process goes on, it unifies, and it's more and more about love and about the bonds that you have with others. So I think that that ancient structure, which is probably Platonic, going all the way back, of how people grow, really fits perfectly also with the same kind of how we shape our predictions through actions.
Yeah. Hey, okay, Kevin, I'm just going to bring it down a little bit for the last question.
All right.
Is prediction relevant to all 3 of those stages, or this error correction? It seems like in the first stage of getting rid of these habits that you don't want, I can see that, your brain is kind of predicting one behavior and you have to correct it. So you have to get rid of that wrong prediction. But now when we're talking about growing in ideals and developing bonds, is there still that same sense of the brain is making an errant prediction that needs to be corrected? Or is that process gone now and it's a new process of growth has started?
Mm-hmm. So in a way, the prediction error correction is what is breaking the vicious cycles in the purgative way, and it's what is building the virtuous cycles in the illuminative way. And it's what elevates it in the unitive. Because at each step, you stretch yourself one step beyond your prediction. And now that's how you grow. It's a way of understanding actually all growth. all growth in some way happens through these predictions.
Okay, so growing in ideals, your brain is going to be predicting, and it's not a bad behavior, something that you don't want to do, but it'll just predict your normal behavior, and you have to exceed that to grow.
Exactly. Yes. So you're always changing. You're always stretching yourself. But the nature of that stretching changes. It elevates. So it's not like people at the highest levels of the kind of, of their inner life, it's not like they're exercising some mammoth decisiveness. But their decisiveness is, in fact, deepened. So if you take a person who, say, is wanting to live temperance, say he had been very much an alcoholic. So initially, he has to be very decisive at not drinking. But you could think, as he progresses, does that decisiveness lessen? And so if he moves beyond his struggle with the craving of alcohol, is he actually going to be weakened? Not at all. Because as he keeps on practicing that, once the cravings and the waves of cravings have habituated, that's the prediction error correction, the next thing is that he's going to increasingly love sobriety and temperance. And the more he loves those, the more that just confirms that he's not going to do the thing of drinking. And then you get to the point where this is, in fact, it becomes just how he loves his family and how he loves others is by maintaining this lifestyle. That now he's capable of living a generous life with others. And that's what he most wants. So you can see that, so it doesn't weaken the previous decisiveness. It actually cements it in the opposite direction, in the direction of the ideal and the bond.
Yeah. Wonderful, Kevin. Well, I think that's a really perfect note for us to end on here.
Great.
Awesome.
All right, Sharif.
Thanks so much, Kevin. And we'll be back next week.
Thanks for your questions.